Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Florida Family Therapy Alliance workshop on domestic violence. This is a workshop for licensure renewal and for those such as one of our members today is taking it for her first license, Luz Mary. You're taking this, and this will count for your first licensure. And it's kind of cool that you can take it even while you're still a master's student. But the rest of us are all old licensees, some older than others, and we are looking to renew for March of 2023. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to make our presenter today, Nyla, the host, and we will go from there. All right, Nyla, do you feel the power?
The power, yes, comes with responsibility and fear. Ooh, now we're good. Okay, so I want to introduce myself first. I want to say hello to everyone. I'm so glad everybody's here. My name is Nyla Whitehead, and before I came to family therapy field, I learned a lot about systemic systems and systemic thinking through previous work. I have worked with children since 2009. I've worked with children in group homes. I've worked with federally qualified healthcare facilities. I've worked in sexual assault, crisis response, as well as domestic violence, crisis response, and also community education. And so the community education of domestic violence has been one of my favorite things that I have participated in. So I have, if you notice at the end of my name, it's CDVP, that stands for Certified Domestic Violence Professional. This is a licensure that I received and upkeep from Illinois. Florida does not issue them, so I decided to hold on to my Illinois license. And so it just lets you know that I have over 51 hours of training in domestic violence, as well as 250 hours of direct contact working with people in crisis, counseling, educating. And so I have to upkeep my license every 2 years. So I kind of wanted to go around, and what I understand is everybody here is here for license renewal. I wanted to see if we can start there. Help me understand who you are, and let me know, what are you in private practice? Do you work in agency work? Where are you? What kind of work are you doing? And what's your target population? Actually, what I want to do before we start, I want to give everybody a number, and we'll go in numbers. How about that? Okay, so remember your number throughout, because we're going to use it again later. So remember your number. So Stacy, if you can be number 1, since you're number 1 on my screen. Annalyn, are you staying? Are you here for the whole? Oh yeah. Okay, then your number. Can Annalyn, you be number 1, since you're number 1 on my screen? And then Stacy's number 2. Let's see, Annette, if you can be number 3. Edie. Okay, there we go. Excuse me. Edie, if you can be number 4. John, if you're number 5. Lorraine, if you're number 6. Tanya, number 7. And Luz Mary, if you can be number, what did I say, 8, 9? Okay, you know. Okay, so if I can understand who you are, let's go back to the question of, are you in private practice, and what's your target audience?
Shall I go first as number 1?
Yep, you're number 1.
All right, so I am predominantly an academic.
Yep.
So I mostly teach, master's, PhD. I do supervision for licensure and for mentoring for supervisors. I have the world's tiniest practice. I might do 1 or 2 hours a week at most, all telehealth. But certainly I used to do a lot of work that involved people who were they were concerned about domestic violence and things like that. So that's my setting.
Thank you. Stacy.
I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in Cooper City. And I am also a qualified supervisor for MFTs and MHCs. I primarily work with couples, and am I I forgetting anything, Nyla? And I'm tired because I just flew back from Arizona yesterday. So
Oh,
I'm a little tired. Bear with me.
you were missed.
Oh, thank you.
Annette, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Hi, I'm Annette Ryder, and I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I'm here in St. Petersburg, Florida,
Okay.
and I'm in private practice. I have about 6 supervisees of MHC and MFT. I do have a Duluth training in domestic violence. Yep. And I've actually done some of these courses, but it's been a while since I've taught any. And so, but I because of all that training, I did work in domestic violence groups, ran men's groups, some of the first female-led men's groups in Southern California a bazillion years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And I like this topic, and I think, you know, when you really look at emotional, verbal, physical, sexual abuse, you can kind of find this throughout all your systems work. So I try to keep my trainees on top of it. And honestly, I don't even know if I need this, but I always like taking it regularly because I learn more and I always walk away with something. So I don't have any specific need, but I know I'll get something. So thank you for teaching it.
Well, I'm happy you're here. So
Yeah, me too.
Edie.
I am Edie. I'm in Gainesville, Florida. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist. Mostly working with couples in private practice in Gainesville. I think that's about it.
Thank you. John.
And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a transplant to Florida, and I haven't been doing a lot of family therapy for the past 10 years, and I'm sticking my toe back in the water. I've always seen people. I mostly do consulting. I do a lot of consulting in the neuroscience world, so that's where I spend most of my time, is actually in psychophysiology. But I was early on, I have a love for family therapy. And so it's actually really exciting to just come to a family therapy continuing ed thing, just because, you know, this is my, it's my home and where I started. I'm an old dyed in the wool family systems guy, even though I'm a neuroscientist. And, you know, my introduction to neuroscience and getting into neuroscience was from John Gottman. I met him in a parking lot and told him that his book sucked, didn't know who he was, and I was a graduate student in the late 80s. I told him his book was terrible, that it was like chewing dirt. And he dragged me along and started me into biofeedback, and then into neuroscience. So
well, thank you. I think it's all systems, right? Like if you think of systemic work, it matters just as much, right, as the next thing. So Lorraine. Can you unmute yourself?
You need to unmute for us, Lorraine.
Sorry. Yes, I'm a transplant as well to Southwest Florida from New Jersey. In private practice, still have kept a lot of my contracts in New Jersey, even though doing telehealth. Worked for over 20 years with the Child Protective Services there, DIFAS. Part of my internship in graduate school was at DV Center in Monmouth County, New Jersey. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, also LCADC, which is a license from New Jersey, licensed clinical alcohol drug counselor, AMFT approved supervisor, and EMDR trained as well.
Wonderful.
And I've also served on the New Jersey licensing board for 7 years as well. So mixed bag, a lot of interest in a lot of different places.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Tanya, your work and your target population.
So I'm Tanya. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a qualified supervisor for MFTs and mental health counselor interns. I'm a certified bariatrics counselor, and I'm kind of working on becoming perinatal mental health counselor. I've done everything and everything from eating disorder residentials, being clinical director, being like just I've done everything qualified. What is it? The reviewing, audits. I've worked in boys groups home, autism group homes. Recently, for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been doing complete telehealth. I do both a nonprofit job, and then my private practice is also very tiny. I only probably see 2 or 3 clients in private practice, which is for the bariatrics evaluations. And with my full-time job, I would say I work predominantly with stay-at-home moms,
Okay.
with postpartum and or with families with children on the spectrum, and kind of just working on family systems.
Thank you so much. And then Lucy, you have to unmute yourself before you start. There you go.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Luz Mary, and I think I'm the baby here. I'm the youngest one. I'm still not licensed, hoping to be licensed in a year from now. So I look forward to learning from every one of you.
Are you working, are you an agency? Are you in private practice?
I'm actually just in school right now, full time.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Okay. So the reason why I asked it is because I want to know who we're working with, not just us in the room, but what kinds of systems are being affected. And I hear a lot. The beautiful thing is that what I'm hearing is there's people here who have such great depth and vast array of experience that some of them I don't have. And so what I wanted to do was just to create a space where we can come to this topic and talk about this topic in a way that we can share and glean from each other. And I just, and that said that there's just talking about this topic, there's always more that we can learn. There's always more that we can see. And so seeing it from a different perspective and seeing how different systems interact is very, very helpful. What I want to do now is share the screen. Here we go. Because I want to take you into my my system. What I'm using is, it's called In Her Shoes. I don't know if you've heard of this this sort of, hold on, what did I do? Nope, that's not what I wanted, sorry. So In Her Shoes is it's a simulation, and these are all stories that are based on their true stories. So what I would like to do is for us to, I actually kind of want to leave, well, let's do it this way since there's not as much time. I want to walk through Natasha Washington's story. And so this was her story. What I'm going to do is remember your numbers. There's going to be a card. And so Anna Lynn, you're number 1. You're going to read the first card, or I'll read the introductory card, then I'll kick it off to you. You read the first card, and there's going to be a decision at the end, and you're going to get the chance to make the decision that you want that fits best for what maybe you think. So let's see. I was going to have us pick between Sandra, Natasha, and Denise. I want to say let's go with Denise. I'm just feeling a pull and a draw to Denise. So let's talk about Denise. Let's see where it is. Okay, so we're waiting for them.
So Nyla, if someone wanted to do this, it would be inhershoes.com.
It would be WCADV. So the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence has, they produce and they sell these kits. I have physical kits where people set them up in physical rooms, and I also have this web kit. So what I'd like to do in this first little session before we have a break is I would like to get through the simulation. And then I kind of want to talk about some statistics, and I want to process with everyone. So here we go. So my name is Denise Callahan, and I'm 45 years old. I live way out in the country. The nearest town, if you can call it that, is 1 hour away. There's a gas station and a bar there. That's all. We have 20 beautiful acres. I used to love to ride our horses or even just walk around the property. Now I love to sit on the back porch and look out over the landscape. Jim or one of the kids will help me wheel my chair into my favorite corner of the porch, and I can just sit there for hours. I've been in the chair for 5 years now since the accident. I don't remember much except that Jim was upset when he was driving and lost control of the car. Our 6 children have been wonderful, each one more helpful than the next. I've had a lot more time to think and to pray since the accident, and the priest even comes out to visit every so often. The closest Catholic church is 50 miles from here, so it's really easy. It's really easy a gift when the father comes to visit. Sometimes I think about how the first time I met Jim. He asked me if I wanted to go riding with him. He was so impressed with me and how I handled the horse, I kept blushing. But it was true. I had a lot of skill. After that, we went riding every week, 6 months after he asked me to marry him. That was the one time I almost fell off my horse. Okay, I have to move something here. All right, so for me, it says here, the problem began later. So I'm going to go to abuse happens. So Annalyn, if you want to read slide number 1.
Okay. Jim had been acting a little strange lately, but he tells you it's a new allergy medication he's on. You pat him on the arm and head off into town for a doctor's appointment. But when you get there, you discover the appointment has been canceled. Frustrated, you turn around and drive straight home. When you enter the house, you see Jim on the couch kissing another woman. What the hell is going on? You yell. The girl buttons her shirt and grabs her shoes. Jim yells at you and tells you that you're supposed to be at the doctor. He starts punching you and pushing you out the door. But you try to lock your wheelchair so he can't push you out. The other woman comes in and starts yelling at him because she didn't know he was married. She slaps him. He pushes her down. In the struggle, she scratches his face. Your neighbor calls the police. What's
Okay.
next?
So we're going to go to police card 1.
Is that still me?
That's Stacy.
Okay.
Sorry. Trouble unmuting. Police card number 1. Okay. When the police arrive, Jim acts like a hurt puppy, crying and showing the police the scratch marks the other woman caused. He tells the police you started the fight. He says that he doesn't know why you're so upset and says to the officers, please help me get her some help. Please help me get some help for her. You're crying so hard you can barely talk. Your bruises aren't going to show for a day or two, so there's no physical injury that the police can see. Jim convinces the police you are mentally unstable. No one is arrested. What's next?
So this is where you get to choose between you want to go talk to your clergy, or you want to make a call to the domestic violence advocate.
I choose.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the clergy.
Okay. All right, who's number 3?
Me. I have to tell you, I'm not sure I can read this. I don't know how to do this on my screen.
Okay.
No, I can't read it.
Okay.
You're embarrassed to talk to the priest. I'm not going to really be able to do that.
No worries. Okay, so do we want to do who's number 4 then?
I'm so sorry, guys.
That's okay. It is small. I totally get it. You're embarrassed to talk to your priest, but he's told you countless times that he's there for you anytime. You describe some of the things that have been going on, the name calling, the food throwing, shoving, and your priest tells you that it's the husband's role to rule the household and decide family matters. The priest tells you to be obedient to God and to your husband. He advises you to go home and pray to be a better wife so your husband won't have to raise his voice or call you names. God, he tells you, will keep your marriage strong. In the meantime, he says you also need to take care of yourself, maybe a weekend at your mother's house, or maybe something to make you feel good about yourself, like a facial or a new hairdo. What's next?
So if anyone here starts getting triggered, I completely understand because these stories are very upsetting. Please take care of yourself. If you need something, just go ahead and put it in the chat box if appropriate. All right, so what is going to be your choice? What would you choose? You're going to go friends and family, or you're going to go wild card?
Huh. Friends and family.
Okay. Now, if these are too difficult to read, because yes, the screens are smaller. I don't know why they gave me small screens, then I can read them if it's, or we can, whoever can help me read can help me read. Who's next for reading?
John.
Okay, hi, John.
Hi. You call your mother and she tells you that, of course, you can come for the weekend. You want to bring your children, but Dennis has band practice and your husband jokes that if you took the kids, it would seem like you were running away or something. So you drive an hour and a half to your mother's house. She is happy to see you and tells you that it's normal to have bumps in the road. Lord knows she and your father had a lot of them. You read the Bible together, and she sends you home with a care package of chicken casserole and a peach cobbler.
Okay, so our only choice here is we're going to go back home again. Who's next for reading?
I am.
Go ahead, please.
All of a sudden, Jim seems to be in a great mood. He apologizes for his behavior. He calls you by the pet name he gave you in high school and says you'll be his girl forever.
Okay, so the next card we're going to go to is forgive and forget. It won't happen again. So who's our next reader?
Is that Tanya?
Tanya?
Okay. 2 months have passed and you feel like you're walking on eggshells. You have been trying to do everything Jim says and you have been praying a lot. During the week, Jim finds cigarettes in your son Dennis's room. He and Dennis start yelling at each other and then Jim goes ballistic. He punches Dennis in the stomach. Oh, sorry, I lost my, in the stomach, and Dennis falls on the floor. Jim keeps beating on him. You make Jim stop, but he swings around and punches you in the face. Dennis throws up. It's full of blood. You call 911. They came really fast last time, so you try to calm down and pray until they arrive. 5 minutes pass, then 10. A half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. Jim says he's going to the bar. When the police finally arrive, they take Dennis to the emergency room. You bring all of your children who have been hiding in the garage. After you go to the emergency room, you know that you can't return home again.
Okay, so are you going to go to the shelter? Or are you going to go with friends and family?
I would go to the shelter.
Okay. Who's next?
I am. You get into the shelter when the shelter advocate hears about the brutal beating your son received at the hands of your husband. They suggest that you call Child Protective Services to report the abuse. The advocate also tells you about protection orders, which are court orders that could give you temporary custody of the kids and tell Jim to stay away from you. What's next?
So you're going to do Child Protective Services, you're going to go to court.
Child Protective Services.
Okay.
So I think that comes back to me.
Yes.
You call CPS and make a report about the abuse that Dennis suffered. The woman you talk with on the phone asks you a lot of questions and asks what you were doing while your husband beat your son. You try to explain what happened, but she interrupts you to tell you that the state might find that you are unfit to take care of your kids because you failed to protect Dennis from getting hurt. She wonders how you are able to take care of 6 children when you were in a wheelchair. She suggests in an offhanded way that you might want to get into counseling or parenting classes. When you get off the phone, you have to fight from yelling or bursting into tears. What's next? Go to the clergy or go to mental health?
What do you choose?
Oh, let's go mental health because I don't like that clergy.
Okay. Stacey.
You tell the psychiatrist that you haven't been sleeping. You're so worried about your children. You can't shake this feeling in your gut that something really bad is going to happen. The psychiatrist tells you that you're suffering from anxiety and depression. Feelings of hopelessness are common in people with your condition. He gives you a prescription for Prozac and sets up an appointment with a counselor for the following week. Meanwhile, your husband has been leaving you messages at work. When are you coming home? He's so sorry. He promises to get help. He can't make it without you. Please come home. What's next?
For Edie?
Jim takes you and the kids out for pizza and gives them plenty of quarters so that they can play arcade games. He gives you a topaz pendant. Topaz is your birthstone.
John?
Jim is upset as his, I'm sorry, you gotta refocus. Jim is upset at his own performance at a ball game. On the way home, he drives like a madman, going faster and faster and swerving from one side of the road to another. He says he's going to kill himself and you too. You beg him to slow down. He tells you that he's just joking. Can't you take a joke? You close your eyes. He tells you that there is one way to make sure that you never leave him again. He reaches for a hunting rifle, but as he reaches behind him, he loses control of his truck and hits the barrier. You both die. Go to the funeral home.
And so this is where Denise's story ends. So I'm wanting to know, did anybody expect this ending?
Yes.
Yeah. Some did and some didn't.
I didn't expect him to die. I expected her to die, though.
Yeah. And I think it's because a lot of, we've seen, we're used to working with families and seeing patterns and understanding patterns. I wanted to know what was most upsetting for you in this simulation.
A few things for me: the priest and the psychiatrist.
What was upsetting about it?
It was all her fault in both situations. Both of them made her feel like it was all on her. Here, take a pill, the psychiatrist says. It's your condition. You're the problem. Pray to God, the priest says, that you can be a better wife, your husband's this way because of you.
For me, the mother's reaction as well as the CPS reaction was the most upsetting for me.
Why so?
I mean, ideally, when I think of a mom, it's nurturing, a place of safety, instead of just go back to the husband and not like, I just feel like even if the advice is to go back to the husband, maybe it should be when everything's calmer, take care of your daughter, make sure she's okay. And then the CPS worker just, oh, you're on a wheelchair. Like, are you even fit to take care of your kids? That's very ableist. And it's almost kind of pushing her to stay with an abuser.
Very good point.
Actually, all of them, the dominant discourse from all of them is that she is to blame, that she is the one that should be doing this. And I'm wondering if the first abuse wasn't the car accident that put her in the wheelchair in the first place.
Yeah, I think for me, the hardest part always in working with these cases, historically and currently, is that I don't even have the bigger problem with the mom. I actually expected mom to do exactly what she did, because that's why, this is how the system models and trains and preps people to pick people and stay and, produce a lot of children with, terrible people and have terrible partners. That's what happens, right? Then you're even more stuck, right? So that part I get the whole, but the professionals that should have the training that should be helping, to me, I find them the most damaging. But I also find them the most damaging in my own colleagues. I feel like I'm regularly talking about stuff and, getting talked over because I don't have that degree and I don't know what I'm talking about, or yeah. So it's it's all very difficult because it's so kind of familiar to my world. Like, of course, I don't have her world, but I can't, I park in a parking space and people block me in, and it's regularly like kind of men, and and I can't get anything to move because I'm always viewed as like this crazy woman. And it's like, if a guy had the same problem, this problem would have got solved, and I, like regularly. And so it brings up when you ask personally, like I can't get my car repaired without having to refer to my husband as Mr. Ryder, and you'll have to speak to him about things because until we found a female mechanic that we both trust and like. So, I can't trust men in general to handle me well because they won't. And, that is my experience. And and I like men. So, so I think that's
present male colleague accepted, of course.
Yeah, I hope. But I'm just, well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what the present
don't know me
anymore. I don't, it's not him. I mean, I just don't know. I think oftentimes women very much buy into the patriarchal society and are part of the problem. But so all of the professionals, the psychiatrists, the CPS worker to victim blame, the priests completely expect that. Rarely do I expect religious people, at least now that I live in Florida for sure, to ever like get it. So I'm pretty much, kind of tainted towards that. So, I would have discouraged her if she was my client to talk to any kind of minister.
Well, and we're set up from the very beginning that she's in a very, very rural environment. And so,
and the priest is the only one
known for being socially conscious and liberal in their thinking about patriarchy and women's rights and all of that kind of good stuff. So it's not surprising, given that the regional environment, we don't know what region it is, but with a truck and the baseball and the rifle, we could make a guess as to what part of the country they might be in. Several parts of the country.
Several parts.
But yeah, and so I'm not as surprised that the child welfare person was buying into the patriarchy as well. Yeah.
And here's the thing too. I love the comments that they're, not only personally are we participating and reflecting on the story, but also systemically. And we're looking at intersectionality, right? So even looking at it personally, they lived so far out into the country. They had 20 acres. They were so far out in the country, and the priest is the only one who visits her. Right. So there's this element of possibly loneliness, this element of, well, this person invested me and loves me and cares about me. And so there's a lot that's going on relationally, even what it means for her that this priest is, well, this person comes to visit me. So maybe that person's voice might have more power than others. And very good points, about, and not only is this a person, but this is a female person responding to all these other participants. We know the priest is male, or we believe the priest is male, right? Most often the priest can be male. We don't know who the other people in the story. You expect for this to happen to a mom because that's how we are engendered in our society. And so we can only look at, one of the obvious disadvantages was that she had a disability, a physical disability. What if this person was a Black woman or a Black man living in a white neighborhood or a white community with white, we hear stories all the time and research even that shows a lot of times Black women are not listened to when their pain is spoken. They speak their pain, they talk about their pain, they're not believed, right? So how much more when we get into intersectionality? So yep. So I wanted to know, I wanted to know from you, What did you particularly notice? We kind of already talked about it, but I wanted to know if there's anything more that we can add about the way in which the systems, the different systems have entered. Did they help or did they hurt?
Every single one of them have hurt her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is like even the harder part, right? The particularly the systems that were supposed to help her hurt her.
Yep.
For me,
Absolutely.
you know, right? The police, from the first interview.
Mhm.
Hmm.
What was
And
Lisa?
I think there's a disconnect. I think that, like, say for CPS, I know they get the training, but I think with the amount of numbers that they have of people to manage, they get it, but in the end, they do what makes their job easier. And if they can coerce or, put pressure, like this example, they do it. Even though if you get them one-on-one and speak to them, they get it. But in performing their job, unfortunately, they do what makes their job easier.
Because they're part of a bigger system. They have
Right.
20, 40 clients maybe, right? And then they have to answer to supervisors who are supervisors, not workers, not frontline staff.
Right, and then a
So-
super supervisor, absolutely, yeah.
And then ultimately to the state law, right? They're ultimately, and so if the state laws are not progressive, then they don't have any support on their back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the shelter might have started to move in the right direction, telling her about protection and about the child abuse. But we didn't get to find out we didn't go to court,
Yeah.
right? We didn't choose the card to go to court. So I'm almost afraid to go to that card to find out what the court did. But it would be interesting to see if she had gone to court, what the cards, what was in the cards.
Right.
For her.
Right.
Mhm.
And then that can further, right? That can further, oh man, if I had only chosen this, what would have happened? If I'd only chosen that, this could have happened, right? So there's something else now saying, oh, what could possibly be my fault?
Mhm.
Right? What could, and it puts, I didn't go or I didn't choose that. Some of these stories, I will tell you, there have been very powerful moves. This one, it was just very clear cut. Everybody failed, right? In other stories, there's different movement. Some of the clergy, there was actually a story, one of the stories, a rabbi was very helpful and said, oh no, women should not go through this. This needs to not happen. Right. There were doctors that were intervening that helped in a positive way. There, so maybe the police officer wasn't okay, but the court system was okay. Or maybe at the court system, they found an advocate and they were okay. And so, and speaking from a shelter perspective, the last thing that the shelter, at least from what my training was, is that we don't want to tell a woman what to do because they've been told what to do this whole time. So that would be in systems there, what we call more of the same. You don't want to do more of the same. You want empowerment. So I want to share just a couple statistics, and then I actually want to go. Annalyn, would it be okay? We're supposed to have to take a 10-minute break at the top of the hour. So would it be okay? Just keep going?
Yeah, just
All
keep
right,
going. We'll end a little early.
Let's get her done. All right, cool. So I want to share with you some of the statistics. So on average, about 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. That is per year, 10 million men and women. The statistics are that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner sexual violence, or stalking with impacts of injury. So it's 1 in 4 women, 1 in 9 men. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. So typically about 1 in 4 women are experiencing, and 1 in 9 men are experiencing domestic violence. And of course, we think who's reporting, who's not reporting, right? Do men report it? Do men even recognize that they're being abused? Do men even recognize that it's possible for a woman or another partner to abuse? So this 25% women statistic it goes across all boards. It's not just, oh, it's higher in the white or the black or the Hispanic or this community. There's no community, religious, it goes across all dynamics. Socioeconomic status, it goes across all demographics. The only place where we see a spike is in bisexual women and bisexual men. And they report more, especially bisexual women report, I think 60%. They're at 60% of having been physically abused by an intimate partner. So bisexual women are experiencing this the most. I don't know that there's information right now about trans and but yep. I don't know if there's information right now about that. I'm sure they're always doing, and even then it depends on, let's say the states get their reports from police officers, right? Are the police departments offering non-binary or trans as an option for gender or, sexuality? So a lot of this information comes from domestic violence shelters, police reports. So those are some of the statistics I want to share with you. I wanted to take you, I want to keep I want to keep screening because I want to show you some of the resources that I've got here. So the hotline.org, this is nice and big. I want to go through what's called the power and control wheel. So this is actually a more antiquated, but it's the original, it's the Duluth model. And I kind of want to update it as we go through just to kind of be a little bit more modern and with the times. But I want to talk about how there's, in all of this wheel, right? Let's start with using intimidation here at the top. So using intimidation is making people afraid, whether that's threats or gestures, just making someone feel afraid. I wanted to know if you noticed in the story, was there any point in the story where you felt where you could pick up on intimidation?
With the CPS worker,
Mm-hmm.
because then she started questioning her parenting ability overall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think the police too.
How so?
Well, I just feel like, she's crying, she's just been punched. And rather than ask her, like they're trying to ask her they're not asking her in a way that would even account for, could she have just experienced some physical violence that can't make it possible for her to speak properly?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it feels like that's what's happened, what's gone on, that type of stuff, rather than like, okay, wait a second, we might need to, like, they don't describe, did they pull them apart? Did they take some time with her? Like, are they looking at, like they're actually buying into the story? So that's intimidating. Like, they're buying into a story that a woman in a wheelchair could cause these kind of problems.
Great point.
And then the very last thing, that was all intimidation. I'm going to pull a gun on you.
Yep, displaying weapons.
I'm going to, I know how to keep you with me forever.
Mm-hmm.
Driving too fast.
Too fast.
Yep, driving too fast.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. There were one of the clients that we were able to help had a story. Hold on, my earbud is messing up. Okay. One of the clients had a story that we worked with that whenever they'd get into an argument or she'd start expressing her opinions, he would just go and pull his gun out and start cleaning the gun. So there's no real threat, right? Stalking is used as intimidation as well. Destroying property, they won't destroy. And this is where it gets into this whole talk of, go in the story, if you remember, go get parenting classes, right? A misappropriation or of what's going on here. And a lot of times these men are told to go get, or people who are physically abusing are told to go get anger management classes. But it's not about anger, because if it was about anger, why don't they just, if they're flipping the house apart, Why aren't they flipping their stuff apart? No, they're flipping your stuff apart.
Mhm.
And so these very small, intricate details, abusing pets, because the whole point is, well, this can happen to you as well. That's why there are some shelters. I'm not sure about women. Well, the only state licensed or facility in Broward County is Women in Distress. I come from Chicago. There was 11 plus for Chicago. So I come here to Broward County and there was one. And I don't know if they have a pet program, but the family shelter where I used to work, we had a pet program, because some people would stay specifically because they didn't want their pets to get hurt. So let's move on to using emotional abuse. This is like put downs, making someone feel bad about themselves. If you've ever heard of crazy making behavior, calling someone names, mind games, making them feel guilty, humiliation. Did you notice any of this in the story? Where?
I mean, when he was the one cheating and he made it seem like she was at fault for coming home
Yeah, you're
versus
supposed to be at
he's
the
at
doctor.
fault for cheating.
Yeah,
Mhm.
her fault.
Her fault.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and when he used, like, you can't take a joke, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's crazy making, right? Like
Yeah.
using verbal abuse. That's a form of verbal abuse.
Gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Using isolation, controlling what she does, who she sees and talks to, what they read, where they go, limiting their outside involvement, using jealousy to justify actions. So did you see any of this in the story?
She was isolated. They said she's isolated physically and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Or however they decided to live way out there, you're
Mhm.
nobody.
Mhm.
Many times it's a harmless suggestion in the beginning of a relationship.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I also feel like if the priest is the only one that's visiting her, she also probably has limited support outside of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I've even wondered, how did the priest get vetted to be part of the support system, right? Why, how, like the priest is allowed to come through, and maybe that's part of the plan.
Reinforces the ideology.
Yep.
Mhm.
Now, if the priests were more liberal, or more, not liberal, but sorry, not liberal. The priests were more, non-patriarchal, or right, or non, I don't know if he would allow that priest to come over. I don't know. So absolutely, just by her being out there, she's
Right.
on her own. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. So again, making light of the abuse, straight up saying that didn't happen. Shifting the responsibility, not taking responsibility for the abuse and what's going on. Also, what I want to say about isolation, please excuse me. What I want to say about isolation too, I mean, even those sentiments of, oh, you're my girl forever, I'm always yours, it's you and me, that very high school sweetheart talk, right? That very, like, this is me and you, like, gives a sense of exclusivity. Oh, this is mine and I'm his, and like we're together, and we're that exclusivity, the other side of that coin in an abusive sense is isolation.
Mhm.
And I'd never
Yeah.
thought about that until just now with this story.
Yeah, DeBecker, he used to describe it as a lopsided seesaw and how to get that off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That type of verbal manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when you're feeling bad, what you like to hear, right? It's you want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
okay, wow, maybe this is over. Maybe that's a one-time incident. Maybe that'll never happen again.
Which goes back to the emotional abuse, right? Using the emotions with the intention of controlling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with minimize, denying, and blaming, we've already said some of them. Were there any other parts of the story that you can name that were minimizing, denying, and blaming?
I don't remember the specifics, but I think a number of the professionals, including the priest, were minimizing and blaming. What does she need to do to be a better wife? And what does she need to do to be a better mother? You know, the child protection service person.
Yeah.
So there were a number of professionals that were saying things that were doing both, minimizing it's not that big a deal, and then blaming her. So
Like
And-
when the CPS
and
said,
he
like,
stated-
what were you doing? You know, when he was
Mhm.
hitting the son.
Mhm.
Yep, it was her.
He specifically said when the police came, she's the one who caused the fight.
Yep.
Mhm.
He straight up lied about, and he showed the police the cuts, scratches from the other woman.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
So using children, this is making the other parent feel guilty about the children, using the children to relay messages, using visitation to harass the other partner, threatening to take away the children. Did any use of the children in the story happen?
Well, the obvious one is when the husband beat up the son, but in a more subtle way about, so how can you in a wheelchair take care of 6 kids?
Mhm.
Mhm.
She
Right.
wanted to take the kids with her to her mom's, and
Yep.
he was like, no, they're staying here.
We caught that. You remember that? Yeah. Yep. You don't want to make it seem like you're running away, do you?
Hmm.
You don't want to make it seem like you're being an unfit mother, do you?
Mhm.
Very intentional.
Yep.
So this one is using male privilege, and it definitely fits within our story. I also want to talk about how it fits even in relationships where there's non-binary, or there's a lesbian couple, or a gay couple. Using male privilege. So treating someone like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle, being the one to define men's and women's roles. And so in newer models, this is the Duluth model. This is the original. Sorry, so let me back up. The Duluth model, they took in a lot of people who had been recipients, I call survivors of domestic violence, and they listened to the experiences that they had. And then they kind of created this wheel based upon the experiences. And so at the time, especially back in the 70s and 80s, and a lot of the only ones coming forward claiming abuse have been abused were women. So a lot of this is very male, it's female centric, there's a lot of wording. Using privilege, though, not just the privilege and the abilities that are given to men by our society, but also this can go for examples of using citizenship privilege. We worked with someone who when one of the administrations had changed over, there was a big case where in, I want to say it was Texas or Arizona, there was a woman who was being very violently physically abused by her partner. She was here. She fled to the United States. And so she went to court for the protective order, and ICE agents were outside the court and arrested her and deported her back to, even though she should have been here on asylum. So, and when that happened, oh my goodness, every domestic violence shelter, we got lawyers involved, we got, and so we had protocol of what we can say to government ICE agents as a worker, as a, someone who's, to protect the people. And even though they had a subpoena, an order, right? So, and their lawyers were getting ready to get involved in protecting us if we got arrested from hiding. It was upheaval. It was upheaval. So there's supposed to be asylum. However, there are situations where the man completely used the court and said, oh, I know where she's going to be. Oh, you want to know where hey, ICE, you want to know where she's going to be? She's going to be here at this court, and had and set it up. So, or there's a situation where, threatening, well, if you call the police, I have my papers, I have citizenship, you don't. So what's going to happen? If you don't do this, I'm calling police and I'm going to tell them that you did X, Y, Z, and you're going to get deported. So the fear of always being deported. Any other kind of privilege, if it's, if yes.
Go ahead, Annette.
I just, heterocentric, thin, lighter skinned,
Mhm.
I've seen it in lesbian couples, the more femme looking, the more possibly straight passing female can get away with more. The thinner, younger, fairer skin, I've heard that from clients of color, can get away with more with the police.
Mhm.
And they can use that privilege, and they have that privilege to move about in the world, and their partner knows it. So it's out there.
Mhm.
I would also say cluster B moms have a lot of privilege, just because I work with a lot of adults that, were abused by cluster B parents, and they just come off as like the very loving,
Yes.
caring mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about too, there's also, oh, go ahead, Annalyn, I'm sorry.
I was thinking that in particularly in same-sex couples, the biological parent
Yes.
will pull that privilege over the non-biological parent as a way to control.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what happens is there's
Insecurity always operates in the same mechanisms.
Bingo.
I've also seen it with you were talking about like citizenship, but also parents that have dual citizenship. They'll say, I'll take the kid to this country
Yes.
with me, and you'll never see them again.
yes, that happens. Mhm.
Right.
Or
Yep.
custody situations where they're not supposed to cross state lines.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's this fear, well, now I have to get my state to communicate with their state, and all this. And how can it constitute as, kidnapping in different states to have different laws around that? And some are progressive and some are not.
Mhm.
I've seen a situation with, a client, Black male client had their kid with a white woman, and the white woman became upset and frustrated that that the father was, I don't know, busy or wasn't able to answer the phone. So she contacted police and had them sent over to his house, to a Black man's house. And this black man has, has the financial affluence to live in a different neighborhood, in a neighborhood with, it's an affluent neighborhood. It's a culturally diverse, or, well, I would say a white neighborhood. So not his. So what does that look like now with the neighbors, with the other affluent neighbors, that now this person who's able to afford the house next door, they're still getting the police called on them? What does that look like, right? So, but did we see any using of male privilege? I know we saw it with, well, I want you to come up. Did we see it in the story?
The priest.
Yep.
Yeah, the priest.
Yeah.
Well, and the mother bought into it
Heard
as
a
well.
priest act
Oh,
like
and the
that.
mother, yes, the mother.
1970s.
What happened, John?
I was saying I haven't heard a priest talk like that since about 1977.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to chuckle. It just
No, and there's this
That-
teaching
what?
too. There's this teaching too that there's an umbrella, right? And so a lot of times what's going on is these teachings are manipulated. Which, side note, here's the whole thing with power and control. Domestic violence is based on power and control. So we're going to talk about a definition. It's a relationship where there's a pattern of behavior, and the intention is to get power and control. And so when a person has run out of power and control, what are they going to do? They're going to reach for something that has authority. A priest, the Bible, God, deity, right? The religious community also has authority of some sort. Okay, so using economic abuse. Yes, Annalyn.
One more large systemic male privilege is trapping a woman by living in a state where they don't allow abortion.
Yep, very much.
Mhm.
Very much.
Mhm.
That's been happening, right? As we see that, those issues are kind of fresh for us in our country.
Yes.
And
So you-
Florida.
In Florida, yeah.
Yeah, we're back there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Using economic abuse, so preventing someone from getting or keeping a job, making her ask for money, giving her an allowance, taking her money, not letting her know how about or have access to family income. Did we see any of this in the story?
I didn't hear all of the story, but so I can't recall anything on that
okay.
specific front, but it felt implied.
Yeah, I felt implied because if you think about 6 kids going to school, homework, or,
Yeah.
you need somebody there pretty much full time.
So we
And-
can project it, but we don't know.
Yeah.
Although I thought they said she was at work.
Yes, she was. She was at work. And what did he
Oh
do?
yeah, he was calling her work.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was calling
Oh,
her
well,
work a lot.
Mhm.
Yep.
When I've seen people do that, then when I've had my female clients, then their boss speaks to them and they say, if this keeps occurring, you're disrupting the workplace, we're going to have to let you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then again, like she's getting punished for the abusive behavior, making her more financially dependent
Mhm.
on him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah, and he would backwards it into her and say like, well, if you wouldn't have caused these problems at the house, then I wouldn't have to call you at your job and bother you.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, guys. I'll try to figure out what kind of massive construction is going on at my house.
Someone wants a picture changed.
And it has to happen right now. Okay. So using coercion and threats, making and carrying out threats to do something to hurt them, threatening to leave, to commit suicide, to report them to welfare, making them drop charges, making them do illegal things. Any of this in the story?
Well, I think he threatened her from the beginning to the end.
Mhm.
It happened constantly and repeatedly throughout the whole scenario.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much threats, but lots of coercion. Come
Yeah.
home. You don't want to be seen as running away, do you? Yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely. You know, there's a seminar coming up that talks about the cross between trafficking and abusers. And a lot of times what we know in trafficking, or even in just in regular relationships, they will get their partner to try drugs or to have drugs in their system or to be high, or they'll, like when people are trafficked, immediately they're given a lot of drugs in their system, something very addictive, because now that they're addicted, they can't run away. They need their dose. They need their thing. It keeps them stuck. And then it's like, well, we're high, so I'm going to beat you up while we're high. If you dare call the police, well, we're high. So go ahead, call the police if you want to, but you'll get caught using substances, illegal, illicit substances, whatever that may be for whatever state.
Mm.
Oh, it's for real. So let's talk about the cycle of abuse. I don't know if this is big for you or not, if this is, but in the cycle of abuse, actually, Dr. Ooh, her name just left me. Baker. She's at Nova. She's at NSU. And she's presenting in Orlando pretty soon. Oh my goodness. Her name just slipped me. Anyway, she was an expert witness on the O.J. Simpson case. Not going to go there, but she kind of came up with this cycle of abuse, and this is an updated, because she had 3 parts of the cycle of abuse. This is updated. So the first one is that there's tension building, tension, in the relationship. Well, I want to start with number 4. Number 4, I feel like it always starts with calm. There's this calm. There's nothing going on. This is what was used to be known as the honeymoon phase, right? It's calm. Things are great. Things feel wonderful. We're so, oh my goodness, we're so in love. And then after a while, there's tension building. You're walking on eggshells and something is off, but you can't figure it out. You can feel that something is going to happen, but you don't quite know what it is. This is tension building phase. There's a breakdown in communication. The victim or the survivor feels fearful and they need to kind of placate the abuser. Well, let me just tiptoe around this person. Then there's the incident. This is when the violence is the worst. So there's verbal, emotional, physical abuse. And mind you, did you notice how on the power and control wheel, we did not talk about physical abuse at all? We didn't talk about physical abuse or sexual abuse at all. So all those things can be happening without it being domestic violence. So there's anger, blaming, arguing, threats, intimidation. And then there's the reconciliation phase where the abuser apologizes, they blame, they give excuses, and listen, you know, it's just me and you. Come on, you're my girl, you're my guy, you're my person, right? And then they go back to this calm honeymoon phase. So were there any of these that you saw in the story? Which of 1 through 4 was particularly strongest for you in the story?
I don't know if it's the strongest, but the calm was when I think he was taking children out, he was buying them their favorite food, that honeymoon phase, and
he got
really
her the
making
necklace.
nice of everything.
Mhm.
I
think
don't
it's
know.
cool-
The
I think
part
it's
that
cool that
scares
you-
me the most is the reconciliation, how she gets talked back.
Yes. Mhm. And a lot of times people don't want, they don't like the tension building in the incident phase. They just want to get back to the calm because it's very confusing.
Mhm.
And they think, oh, well, this is just a phase.
I do think the part where he punched his son, he's coughing up blood. We're at 30 minutes waiting for the ambulance to come, 911, somebody to come, and he like leaves to go drinking.
Yeah.
Like what phase is that? I don't know, but it's like, you know, the cray cray phase. What do we want to call that? The fucked up phase? I don't know, but like I don't know. That's definitely like some kind of weird screwed up privilege that's going on there. But that phase kind of like, I don't know. That's always a scary phase to me when I hear that.
I think it sometimes is useful to also look at how this cycle builds for the abuser, that they are becoming upset, or you know, that somehow their world is falling apart, and so their tension is building. They lash out as a way to release this.
Yes.
And I think that's what happens is he punches the kid and is like, okay, well, I've let that go now. I'm good. Let me go drink.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so whatever the drinking functions for him, right? I don't know if it's celebratory necessarily, but if it's like
The drinking phase.
Yeah,
the drinking, yeah.
Really, honestly, you're talking about a person who has very little, based on this story, very little emotional regulatory control.
Mhm.
Right.
Completely insecure, and you know, he's being seen with another woman, so he's clearly insecure in numerous ways. He's also then going out and drinking, and this is his way of emotionally coping. So the tension builds, and one of his ways of taking the tension off, let's go a la old Bowen, is a nice little triangle. And so he creates another triangle. This one just happens to be alcohol, which is a neurodepressant. So
exactly.
it's not surprising.
Right.
It's also not surprising to me for 2 reasons. As in, one, every time you get away with something, you're being positively, your behavior is being reinforced that he can do this and get away with it. And also 2, just having worked with couples like this, they view themselves as the victim, not the significant other. They really feel like that they were wronged. You know, like dinner should have been on the table at 6 o'clock and you were wrong, like that they truly feel like it should have been done for them and that their behavior was justified.
Mhm. Yep, I agree with
Yeah.
you. When I first moved to
Excuse
Florida,
me.
like 20 some years ago, one of my first couples I had that I got court appointed at my internship, which was a state site, was a young couple. And I remember him and her forever. And they came to me, and within 5 minutes, they were there to get help. He doesn't want to have to, punch his wife, but she's a bitch. So if I could help her not be a bitch, then he could stop punching her. And she wanted help to not be a bitch so she didn't have to get punched.
Yeah.
And
Like
there
I
we
had
were.
a similar, like, well, if she doesn't want to have dinner at 6 p.m., I will find somebody else, or she has to deal with the consequences. That's
Right.
what a lot of these partners have told me. So they really feel like they're actually like doing a favor by staying instead of finding somebody else that would have dinner ready at 6 p.m.
Right. It was, it was very, yeah, I mean, it was sad. It's a difficult case, right? But it's a perfect example of, I don't know, every triangle of the, Duluth model showing up and
Mhm.
in wrapped up in some entitlement that I have to get it my way.
Mhm. And that's what, a lot of domestic violence models are based on, is that they understand that what happens with abuse, there's a part of it is a dehumanizing of someone else and also an entitlement of self. I'm entitled to this at the
Mhm.
expense of someone else. And so,
So Nyla, now you're for me, I'm hearing shades of contextual family therapy. And so how did he come to this destructive, or the abuser come to this destructive entitlement, right? How was the relational ethics used against him? How was he triangulated into destructive relationships? People, children are born thinking this sort of entitlement.
Right.
This is entirely created
Yep.
in families of origin. So this, we could certainly go back in time with this story. We've just heard just a very small partial arc of a much, much larger cycle of what's happening transgenerationally.
Yep.
And it's not just happening to her, it's also happening to him.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that, because, and here's that brings us right around to it, right? We are now, as therapists, we're part of the system. If anyone ever comes to us, right, it's very easy to sit here and say, well, isolated, here's what you need to do. Isolated, here's what you need to do, right? But to be able to have the understanding of, okay, this cycle of abuse, he's experiencing this cycle of abuse. He's experiencing the power and control, right? And while it's he's doing it intentionally and purposefully because it gets him something, how is he triangulated into this? Who did he learn it from? Who taught him? Who showed him? Because if abuse is a behavior that's learned, if we take a look at it, where did he learn this behavior? Who taught him? How did he get triangulated into this? And so, and I think that that's where, my relationship with family therapy, or systems and family therapy, is that there's not a blame, right? Like, we don't want to blame her for the abuse, right? And not a blame, right? He's participating in this and he's intentionally doing things to get what he wants, for sure. She's participating in this to get what she wants. She wants to keep her kids together. She wants to stay with her kids. She's getting something. So that doesn't mean we blame, right? She shouldn't be blamed or made to feel horrible for that. So to be able to flip and see, he's also experiencing this. So now, let's say this couple comes to you. If we can shift into the last portion of this, which is, how do we come into this as therapists, as part of the system? How would this affect our intake practices for those of us who work with couples? For those of us, when we're doing our biopsychosocial assessments, depending on if you have to do them for agency work or not. Considerations for diagnosing. Should we diagnose? Would we be right there with the psychiatrist, right? Like, treatment planning, safety planning, case notes. How do we do this in a case? How does this inform our reporting practices? What about subpoena practices? What if they want one, Nyla, I want you to go to court on my behalf because she abused me or they abused me, right? How does this inform how we show up within those other systems or alongside those other systems? And then in our discharge summaries, how do we, if people use discharge summaries, I want to know, and I can list those things like over again if we want. But how does this inform how we come and we're part of the system as well as therapists?
I mean, when I work with couples, I mean, obviously we meet together, but I also like to meet with them individually to kind of provide a safe place that they can each share what's going on. Because again, it's not always, I mean, abuse can go either way. I also try to keep my notes very brief, but I also want it to be helpful if if a partner is being abused. I want it to also be useful in case they ever have to go to court. But again, I try to keep everything very just non-descriptive as much as possible outside of that. But when I do see that a client is being clearly abused, I try to document it in a way that it's not too detailed, but does display documenting what's going on as it happens, to like leave a paper trail.
I'm wanting to know if anybody else, as we're all clinicians, if there's experience that you've had with documenting in your case notes when there has been abuse.
John, you had a reaction. What came up for you?
Yeah, I've had a number of them over the years. I have been shot at for what I had in notes. Ended up being pulled in court on a domestic violence case that was related to a larger police investigation with a cartel member. Forced me to have to move my family across town. So yeah, I've seen a few.
Seen a few things, huh?
So there were so there's a reaction for me.
Wow, very personal, having to move your whole family to protect them from retribution. My goodness.
Yeah.
I will share, I was a crisis counselor for a teenage girl, and it's I want to say she was even younger than, I can't remember, but the point is that I want to say that the girl was 12. So right on that age of what you can share and cannot share, and who has privacy and who doesn't, right? Who has confidentiality, who doesn't. And the mother eventually wanted my documents so she can submit it to court because she was fighting the father for full custody. So I was triangulated into, or tried to, it was an attempt to triangulate me. And our policy at the shelter was, we don't, even in our notes, we don't write the word abuse. We're a domestic violence shelter, and we don't write the word abuse. We write very, very, very plain. And this is not saying what anybody else has to do. It's just that we know when, if someone is successful in getting subpoenaed, typically the client, the domestic violence client, thinks, oh, this is going to help me in court, and it's rarely ever used to help the victim. And that's what I was shown and taught. I don't know if anybody's right or wrong to do it different. I don't know. I just know what worked for them. That's what I learned from them.
I think it's very dangerous for us as professionals to ever think that we're going to go to court and take a side. For those of you who have not seen it, on the Florida Interest Network YouTube channel, there's a 2-part workshop on You've Been Served, Now What, that talks about how you document around issues, thinking in terms of how your documents might get requested, and then how do you behave in court. And so I think that certainly that the workshop mostly looked at divorce and child custody, but I think certainly all the same ideas would apply here if your case involves any IPV. For me, it's I document what the clients say. I don't provide my own interpretation. I put quotes on things so that it's very clear in my notes that someone else said it. This is not me saying this, and to understand that I am my client is always the system and not any one member of it, which generally makes me pretty useless to the attorneys, because yes, he may have hit her. I was not there to see it. Yes, I saw bruises. But that's all I can say. I'm not going to be able to call it anything in particular because I wasn't there. Yeah, but I think all of that kind of documentation is tricky, and we can certainly ask our next presenter in the prevention of medical errors to address some of this as well.
Yeah, but you have a valid point, because I was always taught private practice in agency to keep it just very factual, like this is who was in the room, this is when it started, this is what it ended. Anything they say is in quotes, their mood, their affect, like no interpretation. If we use the word abuse, it's because like therapists made a call to DCF, like DCF accepted the call. Like that's the closest to abuse like that would get into a note.
And I think that's where there's differentiation, right? When there's clear, when it comes to, because we are mandated reporters, right? That's when it's clear cut, and there's DCF was it maybe in our notes we mentioned how DCF was contacted or notified or but when it comes to strictly interpersonal, violence, where intimate partner violence, where the two adults, what do you do there, right? And not taking sides in the system. As a therapist, because we're mandated reporters, we have to take the side of the child because the child has less power. Now, while we can look at our person in the story, they have less power, but the law has not caught up to that. Right?
Actually, in the state of Florida, if there is domestic violence happening in a home where a child resides,
right,
even if the child is not present, that is still
yes,
a child abuse reportable incident.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So, and there's the difference. So there's a lot of context, a lot of intersectionality here.
But I actually have like little faith in the system, to be honest. I have a client right now. There's 2 kids in the home, 2 elderly. Husband has a concealed weapon, threatened to shoot client in front of the 4 witnesses, which are elderly and children, which are both reportable offenses. And the sheriffs came. He's still in the house, and I'm like, okay, did you take away his concealed carry weapon? Nope, of course he still has it. So I really just don't.
I share that with you. I share that with you, Tanya. Like we, in Illinois, which is, where I'm from, and where, in Illinois, the law is very progressive for people who are domestic violence victims, but they're very protective of police officers. And when they've had a case against them for domestic violence, they can keep their guns. They can keep their, and so, I mean, it's, until we keep working at it, we are also parts of the system. The system is also our client too. How do we do what's best for the system? And so it's hard. And this is where we talk about, at least in my training, we talked a lot about self of the therapist. Well, who am I as a therapist, right? Am I a protector of my client? Am I protecting my client against the system? What part of the system, or am I part of the system? What do I take? And so there's a lot of those philosophical questions there. But I totally feel you. I totally get that. It's really hard. It's tricky. And this is why, listen, if you're a therapist, you need to be taking your vacations and your massages and all this stuff, because, you know, we don't get enough. You know, our compensation is, you know, we don't get it. I totally, my heart is with you, Tanya. It really is. I wanted to know, you know, how might this inform your intake practices if you're working with a family or with couples?
Say that again.
How might this inform your intake practices?
In what way? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I'm thinking of the question the way you're trying to ask it.
Absolutely.
What is the it?
So how might, all that we've been talking about and understanding that we're part of the system, we're therapists, how might this impact the way that we, you know, our intake practices? For example, a couple calls you, or one person of a couple calls you and they want couples therapy. How might now you might be influenced to have an informed way of doing the intake process? Yeah.
Well, I think you know mine, which is, I actually talked to both parties separately, on the phone before I see them. And then, if there's some sort of sense that something's going on, usually my initial session is an hour and a half with a couple. I will, split the session up and do half hour with each of them alone. And then a half hour back together.
I've actually stopped working with couples just because it's disastrous, in my opinion. I made this decision about 6 months ago. I'm just over it. I'll do like touch-ups for like individual clients that kind of, oh, I want to work on our communication skills here and there. But I'm really over the couples counseling. They usually call when they're in crisis. And then they disappear and then they come back and the cycle just repeats itself, or they want to stay in the cycle of abuse. And I refer out at this point.
I refer all my domestic
I'm
violence
sorry to hear that.
issues to you, Nyla. I'm lucky Nyla's in my private practice.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yes.
Oh.
You know, the truth
One of the
of
things that stood out from this workshop is how much the larger systems collude with the patriarchy. And so what it reminds me to do that probably I certainly don't do it up front, but I should probably keep it in the front of my mind a lot more, is what are the systems that they have been in touch with? Where have they gone? And not just on IPV issues, but just what other systems are engaged or that you have touched to find out what are the other points of view that have rung in on the presenting problem. Yeah, that's probably what stood out the most for me on and how that I need to assess for that more extensively.
And that's a great reminder for me as well. What systems, you know, so what might be some of the questions that you might ask to find out which systems they have
Are you asking me?
Yes, please.
Okay, so who else knows about this situation? Who else have you talked to about this situation? Who do you wish that you could talk to about this situation? Certainly, what did they say? What of the things that you've heard, what makes sense to you? I think that kind of stuff.
Do any of you use echo maps?
Oh,
Just a good, you know, who's a support and who's a stressor, and let's just get them all kinds of them out.
Mhm.
Mhm.
One of
Good
the
point.
things I was excited about coming to this today was actually seeing other people who are family therapists in town, because I'm new enough that I don't know anybody.
Well, now you
I
know
mean,
a bunch.
right
you
now
know a
I'm
bunch
not
of us.
seeing anybody. The people that I see though are mostly, head injuries and things like that. So it's a completely different clientele, but
Mhm.
I still run into all of this, but I'm at everyone else's mercy who's already been in town. Who do I refer to? Where do I go for XYZ? So it's kind of nice at least to have written down your names.
Well, and you're welcome to post such questions and things in the our Facebook site.
Yeah. I
Assuming
stopped
you're on
using
Facebook.
Yeah, I stopped using it about 3 years ago when
Understood.
Yeah,
But
I'm not on Facebook either. What you could do is, I mean, like, I know my area has a small, like, just therapist organization. It's not huge, but they might meet like once every few months. But also, even if you go into Psychology Today or Therapy Den, you could just pick different people that like you would want to reach out to and just start building those connections, so they could be people that you feel comfortable referring to.
John, which county are you in?
I'm in Palm Beach.
Okay,
okay, well,
so
we'll have to
so
hook you up with Carrie
yeah.
Bolden,
Mhm.
because we're reactivating the Palm Beach chapter of AMFT.
Mhm.
So stay tuned. We'll
Yep.
be
Okay.
we'll be certainly doing that. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So, I want to bring us back to, I want to talk about, I wanted to bring something up about intake practices. And I want to say, not only do I also talk one-on-one with the clients, but I'll begin to ask them questions in my intake about how they solve problems. And I'll ask, how do problems usually get solved, or how are decisions made? That's another question. It seems like very easy. How are decisions made? Who usually gets to make the decisions? So I'm looking for power and control. I'm looking for now I might hear, oh, she always makes the decisions, and it doesn't mean that she's controlling or having power or whatever. It could be, but it lets me know the dynamics, right? So I hear to pick up on things. One of the things I also do is I normalize, right? So when I'm picking up and I'm hearing, oh, this sounds like there might have been some combative experiences here, or some, I will ask questions like, okay, so how when things are like the scariest, or when they've been the scariest, or when they've been the most heated, what happens? Like a pillow gets thrown, a wall gets punched, shoving, so I'm normalizing smaller tapping, pushing, shoving. Has there been any, and I'll get to hear what kinds of physical interaction has happened, so I can see, because like I said, we looked at this whole power and control wheel, and there's no physical, well, on the power and control wheel, there's no physical, right? And a lot of times physical, it's a form of communication. If you think about it, physically hitting is a form of communication. And sometimes it's one of the last things that will happen. So I look for, how are decisions made? How are you able, when one of you talks about emotions, are there any topics that are difficult to bring up? Well, what do they do? What happens? So I'll ask these questions, and I still get my intakes done within 15 minutes. I'm not on the phone for half an hour. I don't know how some clinicians do it, but these are questions that I ask to see what are the interactional patterns, and are there power and control issues? Can they usually solve problems without it getting to be? And that's how I know when it's a relational issue and not a domestic violence or intimate partner violence. Because, there might be a situation where, someone has a brain injury, and so there's not much, there's short circuiting or whatever, right? And they go to physical violence, right? And in the typical sense, though, in the 1970s grassroots domestic violence that I come from, right? Like training that I come from, we're talking about intentional power and control here. And so I look for those kinds of.
Neil Jacobs' whole thing on the difference between vipers and bulldogs is still very, very valid. And when Dr. Gottman did the work on that with him, years ago. That was, I remember that we watched videos and actually had to do what was called then SPAF coding, and we had to code every affective move with numerically. And yes, yeah, there's a big difference. And power and control, you have power and control with people who feel they really are powerful, and power and control from people
Yes.
who are grabbing at power because they feel very
Yes.
powerless.
Mhm.
There's a whole variety
point.
of things
Mhm.
that are underneath all of that that are very valuable to be able to pick up in an interview, because you have to know who you're going to be able to work with or what kind of work you're going to be entering, because sometimes the work, like the case I was saying about, where there was retribution, sometimes the work is you need to leave or you're going to be dead. And that's, I'm not trying to tell you that that's, it's going to be your choice, but.
And that's a
Right.
very good point, because the client who came to me and her mom was both a victim. She was a victim. I mean, they were, but and a survivor of domestic, but at least my understanding was right. That's how they. But even victims can be people who are trying to grab for power and control, and they're going to use the systems, right? I held more power, and she wanted to use me as a tool in court and wield this counselor, sorry, I wasn't a therapist, this counselor tool. And I can have compassion for that, even though, I was like, okay, this is a very powerful thing. Let me be careful how I'm gonna. So I didn't want, and I ended up not getting subpoenaed, thank God, knock on wood. But I wanted to know if there was any other part of the working with the client process that we wanted to talk about.
Nyla, what is the research on the effectiveness of safety plans?
Via what, sorry? I don't know the research on it, but I'm glad that you said something about safety plans, because I want to bring you to this. Can you see this behind me? So the hotline.org, or sorry, so there's a hotline.org, and I want to put these in the chat in just a second. There's two big major resources: NCADV, which is the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, right? They're the ones who put out all the statistics and the research. So if I scour their website, I might find some research for you on. But I do want to talk about safety plan, not so much research wise, but more in the sense of there are tools that you can use for finding, for creating a safety plan. When the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or the hotline.org, is the second major resource that I use. They have a thing where you can go in and answer questions and put in, you can create a safety plan. So you can go in and answer. So this says interactive guide. Whom do you live with? Family, roommates, alone, my partner. What's your zip code? They're going to find resources, maybe a local domestic. Are you in high school, college? Because they also recognize a lot of state laws and litigation. They recognize roommates as also being able to perpetrate domestic violence, and exes being able to perpetrate domestic violence. So they ask you, who do you live with? Where do you have kids? And so you can go through the process. There's all these steps, right? For us who are we're talking to a client in office, we want to figure out who are safe people and what are our resources and what do we need, right, to keep. So safe people, who is there someone whose house you can go to? Is there a neighbor who you can tell everything, you can tell them they're safe for you to tell them and keep them abreast of what's going on? That, hey, if you see me flicker the lights 3 times, please call the police, or to safety plan with, right? So you're figuring out who in your family, in your system, right? So even though in our story, mom was not perfect per se, she was a safe place to get at least some escape from, to seek some escape. So when a person is planning to leave, or even if they're planning to stay, but they're having to be prepared to leave in the flight, in the heat of the whatever, in that moment, we want to talk about grabbing all important documents. The lease or the deed to the house, you have to grab that because they will destroy that. Passports, birth certificates, information like that. And to have them all ready and ready to go when you leave, and to have a plan. I've got 2 stories for you real quick. One of them, this was when the Affordable Care Act first kind of came in. And one of our mom survivors with kids, there was under so much financial abuse that she was given $5 a day for gas to get the kids to school and back, and she had to put gas in the car every day, $5.
Oh, wow.
Well, the way that she was able to escape was because she said, "Hey, honey, I need the paperwork for the kids. I need their birth certificates and their social security cards and all this stuff because I have to go sign them up for Obamacare." She took them on a plane and she went to another state. And so very smart, very careful, very, very planned out, right? So another story, there was a woman who escaped, and she timed that there's this furnace system that was very, very loud, and it would go on for 20 minutes and off for 10, 20 minutes and off for 10, or whatever it was. And during the 20 minutes where it was loud, she was up at night gathering her things and pulling them and getting her papers. And then during the 10 minutes where it was off, she would stand still for 10 minutes. And then 20 minutes, as soon as the air is coming out, she's going and grabbing. And that's how she was able to escape in the night, at night, while her partner was sleeping. So, I mean, we talk about when there's an argument, don't go where there's sharps. Don't go where there's, you can't get out. Don't go into a bathroom because now you're locked in. So, I think I didn't give a lot of information because what I would like is for you to you can Google even safety plans. You can take this simulation test, and I think that this would do a better job of going over safety planning than what I would, to let you know what kinds of documents and what kinds of things are important. And I have had a safety plan with a partner. They came in and I didn't do the intake the best that it slipped through me, it slipped past me, and I was really concerned. He was balling his fist near her face and she didn't see it because she was kind of looking down. He was balling his fist on purpose to let me know. And I separated them out and I said, "Hey, she's kind of really still visibly upset right now. I really just want to work with," I blamed her, right? "Can you give me some time in the, let me," so he stormed out and he went to the car. I said, "Now listen, I want to tell you what happened, what I saw." I said, "Are you concerned? Are you afraid at all?" We ask the questions, do you feel fear? Are you afraid? Are you ever afraid? Because do you think he'll hit you? No. Do you feel afraid? And well, yeah, because a lot of times it's that intuition, but I don't have physical evidence. He hasn't done anything. She hasn't done anything. They haven't done anything. Well, believe that. That's your intuition. Do you feel afraid? And so if there is, I said, "Well, I'm in that situation. I said, I'm concerned for your safety." And I said, "Listen, she was staying with him because she normally lives with her mom, but her mom had COVID and she couldn't go back home." I said, "Well, if you get that little feeling that something's off, don't hesitate to leave the house. Grab your phone, grab your purse, make sure your purse is by the door, make sure your phone is on your body, do that." And so, and when you leave and he's going to ask you, "What did you guys talk about for a half an hour?" I said, tell him that we've practiced 4 square breathing. And you practice that until your anxiety releases. And that's why it took a half an hour. I said, "Here's how 4 square breathing works. You breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. And so you did that until you can regulate. But you don't have to talk about, "Oh, she said that you're abusive and da da da." I said, we talked about the risks of what can happen if. So.
Yeah.
And then you had something?
I think these are great tools online. I'm always really cautious with my clients because I've had too many partners that are abusive that are very able to get
Oh,
into
yes.
all online stuff.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I still do hard notes, why
you
I
see
still
the-
have
Yeah.
cut cash option. There is no record of anybody in my system anywhere because I have clients, partners who have broken into EHR systems and can do it any day of the week. So
Exactly.
And-
So beautiful point how that this informs your practice,
yeah,
right? Having cash pay, allowing cash pay clients, allowing starting on time, ending on time, right? And you see this little button here, right? On any domestic violence agency website, there's a quick exit. If I went to ncadv.org, immediately there's like pop-ups, my website, immediately there's pop-ups, right? This is saying, this right, not that. There are pop-ups.
Safety exit.
Usually, I guess I've been on it. But quickly, very quickly, what'll happen is you see, and they're like, hey, there's an exit button if you need to hurry up, and it cleans it from your search.
right.
And it makes it look like you haven't been there. Even when you Google it, it doesn't show up in the click hyperlink. It doesn't show up purple or another color. So that's
But
your
does
exit.
it go through? Well, I don't want to get through all the technology, but I tend to tell people to stay off of their search engines completely. I mean, unless you know you're in a search engine that isn't
That's what this technology
off
is
your
for.
algorithm stuff somewhere, so that like I'm looking at blinds and the next thing I know, my husband looks up something, I can pretty much tell you what I'm getting for Christmas, even if he uses DuckDuckGo by looking at my Facebook page, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's
So that's what this is for. If you go on your own computer and you look, you can it'll show you like, hey, just in case if you have to get out, and it cleans it and there's no trace of it in your search.
even through like, what's the search engine then? I don't know that I would trust it, but
Okay.
I here's what I do for people. I'll create a plan. I'll show them stuff online, and I'll advise them to go to libraries to look at
Right.
things.
Right.
Use
Exactly.
public computers.
Yes.
Don't use your phone.
Yep.
But by the time you're using a phone or your device, you need to be far away from them. Because like their life is, for me, I'm trying to selfishly not have another client get killed.
No, you're right.
And I have to live with
And
that.
for me, what I've done before with clients is I've shown them the power and control wheel, but I keep it in my office. I don't send them home with that information, right? So
No
exactly. So
paperwork,
then
no books, no nothing.
So you do that. You can bring them through this on your own computer then, if that's what you want. One of
Yeah,
my
that's what I
therapy
would do.
training sites, we used our computers as the therapist. We have 3 minutes left, and I just want to make sure
It was excellent.
I'm going to stop share.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any lingering questions for Nyla? Doesn't sound like it. All right. So thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you at the next workshop.
Do I stay for
Do
the
we
6
just stay
o'clock on
right
the same
here for the
link?
6?
I'm out for this one. Nice to have met you all.
Nice
Thank
meeting
you
you.
all. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyla. It was excellent.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Nyla, could you stop? Could you return host to me?
I'm glad. I was just going to end it. So how do I don't know how to do that.
I would like you to not end it.
Do
So
I stay here for the 6 o'clock?
yes, please stay. Just stay through. Yes.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get the recording stopped so I can start into the next one.
Okay, let's see. I don't see where I can
You
stop
go-
recording.
Okay, stop the recording for me. That'd be
Okay.
great. And then I need you